If you're a fan of action movies like John Wick, you're in for a treat. Get ready for an incredible mix of action and comedy with Sakamoto Days. Sakamoto Days is a hilarious and action-packed manga featuring themes of friendship, perseverance, and overcoming challenges. The story follows Taro Sakamoto, a legendary hitman who left his deadly past behind for a quiet life. Now, he runs a convenience store with his family. Despite his chubby appearance, Sakamoto's skills are as sharp as ever. Can he protect his loved ones from lurking dangers? Let's find out. The story begins as Sakamoto's store is introduced. There are children playing who notice poop on the street, thinking it came from aliens. Meanwhile, inside, a storekeeper is busy eating noodles. Taking a look back, there is a hitman considered the GOAT or greatest of all time, named Taro Sakamoto. It is seen that someone falls from a building, while numerous armed men recognize Sakamoto and believe he must be killed. He runs towards them extremely quickly, even managing to decapitate one, much to the shock of his companion. It's quite astonishing, almost like John Wick, how he defeated so many enemies alone. All the bad guys feared Sakamoto, and he was respected by other hitmen. However, one day, something happened that changed his life. At a convenience store, he met a beautiful woman, and it was love at first sight. Because of this, he chose to retire and left his life as a hitman for love. They got married and soon had an adorable child. With his new life, the once sleek and muscular hitman gained weight and his appearance changed. Outside Tokyo, Sakamoto's store can be found. A man outside mentioned he was looking for Sakamoto. Inside the store, a child had drawn a target on the door and told Sakamoto that if he hit the target with his bow, he should be given free juice. The child was excited to play. The former hitman Taro Sakamoto was sitting while his wife Aoi watched over their store. She noticed that the boy was visiting their shop frequently. As the boy was picking up his bow from the floor, he lost balance, causing the contents of his bag to spill out. Coincidentally, a man walking in front of him got splashed. Clearly annoyed, the man grabbed the boy angrily, pointing out the stain on his white pants. Aoi was concerned and asked her husband what they should do. Just as the man was about to hit the boy, Sakamoto quickly intervened, showing his immense strength. He grabbed a pin. In his mind, he wanted to stab the man in the neck. However, he just walked away and called Sakamoto Porky. The boy, in tears, thanked him. In Sakamoto's mind, he almost killed the man. Someone then complimented his action. He saw how Sakamoto targeted the man's carotid artery with the pin. This person introduced himself as Shin, the clairvoyant, meaning he has a supernatural ability to see the future or things not visible to others. It had been quite some time since they last met. Suddenly, he was punched. Shin was shocked because Sakamoto's first thought upon seeing him was to kill him. Shin reiterated that he was Shin, who used to work for him. Sakamoto was annoyed by his sitting there. Shin's ability is to read others' thoughts. When the two talked outside the store, Shin confirmed the rumors that upon retiring as a hitman, Sakamoto had opened a store. Shin urged him to return to the world of hitmen, but Sakamoto did not respond. Shin lamented that it was a waste of his abilities, and also noted that he had gained weight. Nevertheless, Sakamoto simply replied that he would not return to being a hitman again. Shin reminisced about the times when everyone feared Sakamoto. He was a legend, which is why he couldn't accept what he had become. Meanwhile, Sakamoto was busy eating ramen. Shin mentioned that in the past, he only ate field rations. He sighed and excused himself to smoke a cigarette. He was about to say something more, but Sakamoto stopped him, pointing out that it was a no-smoking area. Shin read Sakamoto's mind, realizing that despite being out of shape, Sakamoto could still kill him in an instant. This made Shin nervous. Suddenly, someone passed by and greeted Sakamoto, apologizing for the intrusion but asking if he could ask for his help. Shin was shocked that Sakamoto was approached, wondering if the man needed someone whacked. Nevertheless, they accompanied the man who mentioned he needed to cut a branch off a tree but couldn't reach it, so he turned to Sakamoto for help. Using a knife, Sakamoto helped the man with his problem. Then, a parent asked Sakamoto for help in getting their child to eat vegetables. When two children cried because they only had one ball, Sakamoto cut it in half for them. Shin couldn't believe that Sakamoto was the jack of all trades of the area. Shin thought it might just be a way for him to hide his true nature and blend into the community. He couldn't help but mention to Sakamoto that in his opinion, the new Sakamoto seemed like a joke. Sakamoto remained silent while Shin was hit by a toy arrow from a boy, which annoyed him. He then left and got into his car. Shin thought that in the 5 years they hadn't seen each other, Sakamoto seemed to have softened. Nevertheless, he still found him to be very cool. And even though he had gained weight, his aura was still unique. As he repeatedly banged his head against the steering wheel, he expressed a desire to work with Sakamoto again. Suddenly, Shin's boss called to ask if he had convinced Sakamoto. He answered no. When asked if he had taken Sakamoto down, Shin responded, asking if that was necessary since Sakamoto had become tubby and was no longer a threat. He was stopped short when his boss stated that the rule was anyone who leaves their organization must be whacked, and since Sakamoto had broken this rule, he could not be allowed to live. Furthermore, his boss angrily stated that if Shin couldn't do it, there were many others who could handle the task. If Shin caused any problems, his boss assured him that they would also take him down, so he should just complete his task. After ending the call, Shin reflected and said it seemed he had no choice, because if not him, someone else would do it. If so, he thought it might as well be him who does it. Therefore, the next day he returned to Sakamoto's store. Aoi recognized him and asked why he had come back so soon. A child also asked him if they could play, but he apologized, stating it was time for war, and then he pulled out a gun. As Shin entered the store, he greeted Sakamoto and mentioned that he needed to leave, so he had come to pay his respects. Sakamoto did not respond and just chewed on candy. Suddenly, Shin drew his gun and aimed at him, but Sakamoto used the candy in his mouth to stop the bullet intended for him. Shin couldn't believe that Sakamoto had managed to block his shot using only a cough drop. Then, he was distracted by an ice cream thrown at him and didn't notice Sakamoto hiding. He was frustrated because he could no longer read Sakamoto's thoughts. While searching for him, he used cough drops as ammunition in his makeshift slingshot. Even though he was shooting through a small hole, Shin was surprised by the power of the shots. He quickly ran to get closer and shoot him, but Sakamoto anticipated this and threw a cream puff at his face. When he was distracted, Sakamoto took the opportunity to position himself behind him. As he turned around, Sakamoto kicked him with such force that it destroyed the shelves and scattered the merchandise, sending Shin flying. Surprised, Shin woke up to find himself suddenly bandaged. Aoi and her child greeted him. He asked where he was, and they told him it was the second floor of the Sakamotos. Aoi then invited him to have dinner there. Shin did not expect this and wondered what was happening with his assignment. Nonetheless, he could not refuse their invitation to eat. He wondered if the food might be poisoned, but he remembered that he had plenty of conditioning to counteract poison. So, he tried the food and was almost moved to tears by its deliciousness. Aoi laughed, saying her husband had the same reaction when they first met. Shin couldn't quite understand his feelings. In all his years as a hitman, he had never experienced anything like this. He thought maybe Sakamoto had stopped killing to protect his mundane, everyday life. After dinner, Shin left and thanked them for the meal. Sakamoto simply smiled and pointed to their sign which read, "Please come again." Shin was amused and accepted that he was truly no match for him. Shin reported to their boss, who was puzzled why he wanted to speak. It was a disgrace that he hadn't managed to take down Sakamoto. Suddenly, Shin knelt and begged for Sakamoto's life, which surprised their boss. The boss laughed at Shin for kowtowing to him. He wondered why Shin was defending Sakamoto. Shin responded that Sakamoto now had a home. The boss didn't care about that. Since Sakamoto had ignored their rules and abandoned his responsibilities, he deserved to die, the boss said. If someone needed to take responsibility, Shin was willing to die as long as Sakamoto could live. The boss was puzzled as to why Shin would do such a thing. He replied that it was his penance for pointing his gun at his hero. The boss agreed and said if he killed himself, he would let Sakamoto live. But the boss truly thought that he should rather die if he believed in that. Shin responded that he knew what the boss was thinking, reminding him that he could read minds. So, the boss ordered others to kill Shin. leaving him with no choice. Back at Sakamoto's store, he heard the gunfire exchange on the other line. So he opened the register and revealed a room filled with various types of guns. He took a gun from there. Returning to Shin, the boss couldn't believe that they couldn't defeat Shin alone. They explained that Shin could predict their moves. Shin realized that he was running out of bullets. The boss clarified to the others that Shin was a clairvoyant, so if they approached him, he would read their minds. Shin had no choice but to fight, and someone was waiting for him. But just as the person was about to shoot him, the man fell, but his shot hit Shin on the leg. Shin was startled and fell, and because of that, he was surrounded. He knew he was about to die, but Sakamoto arrived just in time to rescue him, and he had tasered the men surrounding Shin. Despite only using that, he managed to knock down the others around him. Shin was surprised. The boss noticed Sakamoto's arrival and ordered his men to kill him. Even though there were many of them, Sakamoto quickly grabbed and disassembled their guns, then punched them hard. They couldn't react due to his incredible speed. Suddenly, someone appeared behind him with a knife, but Sakamoto grabbed him, causing him to drop the weapon. He then punched the man in the face. The boss ordered his men not to attack one by one, but to shoot simultaneously. Sakamoto used the knives to cut their weapons and then stab them. Even the boss was struck down and couldn't do anything. Shin was extremely impressed with the legendary hitman Taro Sakamoto. He asked Sakamoto how he knew where his gun was. Sakamoto handed it to him and disassembled it to remove something. Shin was surprised to find that a mic had been placed inside it during their fight. Shin realized that Sakamoto didn't easily trust him and was always on guard, which was impressive. Shin said he had made a decision, but before he could finish, Sakamoto threw an apron with his name on it at him. He offered Shin 800 yen, or $8.50 per hour, plus extra for overtime. Shin couldn't believe it even as they returned to the store. He put on the apron and stood with Sakamoto at the store. Shin requested that Sakamoto not eat ramen next to him because his shirt was new and Sakamoto's messy eating caused soup to splash. Shin noticed that the ramen in the store was running low. When Aoi entered, she complimented Shin, saying he fits right in. Shin blushed when she said it suited him. An elderly woman inside was having trouble finding detergent, so Shin quickly went to show her where it was. The woman was happy she didn't have to ask and thanked him. Aoi was pleased and said Shin would be a great help to them. The young boy there thought he would rather see Mrs. Sakamoto in that apron. Shin got annoyed because he heard the boy's thoughts and called him a perv. The boy kept pestering him, asking if he was happy working there. Shin replied yes, although he was still adjusting. However, he said it was better than his previous job. When asked what that was, Sakamoto thought that if he revealed the truth, he's dead. And so Shin sweated and said it was a cleaning job for society. And that is the story of how Shin ended up working with Sakamoto again. A week has passed since Shin left his life as a hitman and started working for Sakamoto. However, he was greatly impressed by Sakamoto. He said he had never seen CQC or close quarters combat like that from any other hitman. Even though Sakamoto is retired, he is still the best. Sakamoto, on the other hand, thought he should just focus on working. Shin added that Sakamoto had taken down each of them with a single shot. Aoi's ears burned when she heard this. She asked her husband if he had gone back to killing. Sakamoto vehemently denied it. Shin asked about the men Sakamoto defeated. He clarified that their wounds weren't fatal. Aoi reminded him that the penalty for breaking their family rules was divorce. After that, she walked out. Shin asked what these family rules were. In his mind, Sakamoto imagined stabbing Shin in the neck with pins. Shin seemed to sense this because he read Sakamoto's thoughts about wanting to kill him. Sakamoto then told him to stop babbling. Aoi stepped out for a while, feeling a bit worried about how hard she had been on her husband that morning. Her companion reassured her, saying she understood because she does that too. They said goodbye as Aoi's bus arrived. Outside the store, Shin was busy sweeping. He noticed an officer on a bike and asked if he was patrolling. The officer recognized him as Sakamoto's worker. The officer mentioned that thefts had been frequent in the area lately, so he was on the lookout. Shin boasted that their store was the #1 safest shop in Japan. The officer was pleased to hear this. As the officer left, he mentioned that they didn't know when the thieves might strike again. In the store, Shin said he couldn't imagine real crime happening in that area. He joked that maybe the officer was just watching too many movies. Sakamoto thought about making deliveries. Meanwhile, on the bus, armed men wearing masks were pointing guns at the passengers. They ordered everyone to stay still, declaring that the bus now belonged to them. They warned that anyone who made a suspicious move would be killed. It turned out that the bus Aoi had taken was the one being hijacked. She was surprised, but her main concern was what would happen to the ice cream she had bought, as it might melt. She wondered if the thieves would be angry if she ate it there. Meanwhile, they closed the store, and while riding the motorcycle, Shin asked again about the family rule Aoi had mentioned. Sakamoto replied that it was too much effort to explain. Shin suggested that he could just remember it, as he could read Sakamoto's mind. Shin felt envious of that family vibe. Sakamoto noticed something, so Shin quickly braked. He asked what was going on, and Sakamoto replied, "Bus hijacking." And there was his wife, Aoi. Inside the bus, one of the men mentioned that it was traumatic when his favorite manga got discontinued. Therefore, they wanted to crash the bus into the Shui building. They claimed their sacrifice will improve the manga industry. The other passengers were terrified, while Aoi was only worried about being late for dinner. One of the men pointed a gun at her and said she seemed indifferent to manga, too calm for someone about to die. Aoi was surprised to realize he was talking to her. Aoi replied that she knew he would always save her. The man asked who she was talking about. His companion commented that she must be crazy and to just leave her alone, since she was going to die anyway. As they hurriedly chased the bus, Shin confirmed their rescue mission priorities. First, to rescue the hostages. Second, to ensure their identities as hit men were not revealed. Sakamoto added that no one should die and that they couldn't inflict fatal injuries. Shin mentioned that during their fight the other day, he wondered why Sakamoto was so careful not to kill anyone. Flashback to 5 years ago, Sakamoto was 22 and Aoi was 21. Sakamoto was covered in blood, so Aoi knew he had killed someone again. He replied that he was just doing his job. Aoi couldn't accept this, questioning why he would do something so terrible. Sakamoto said he needed to work to buy her a gift. She said she didn't want a gift tainted with blood. This made Sakamoto think deeply. Aoi walked out, saying she couldn't take it anymore. If he couldn't change, then they couldn't be together. Suddenly, she jumped over the railing and said goodbye to him. Sakamoto was shocked by what she did and quickly ran to save her. In his haste, he broke the railing, which puzzled the onlookers. Aoi thought they were going to die, but fortunately, there was snow. She looked at Sakamoto and said he would surely be sad if she died. She asked if he understood that just as he wanted to save her, others felt the same way. Everyone has someone important to them. Therefore, she urged him to promise that he would never kill anyone again. That, she said, was their rule. To make amends for the people he had killed, Aoi said Sakamoto should devote himself to helping others. She admitted that what she did was a bit reckless. Once again, Sakamoto told Shin that they couldn't kill anyone. As usual, they would communicate through telepathy. Finally, they were at the back of the bus. Shin prepared to climb on top of it. The armed men inside were startled and wondered what the noise was. Shin used his hoodie to cover his face and told Sakamoto to cover his as well to avoid being recognized. Shin didn't notice that there was a bridge nearby. Sakamoto prepared to jump very high, leaving Shin on the bus, who suddenly lay down to avoid hitting the bridge. However, his motorcycle was damaged because of it. Shin looked for Sakamoto and was surprised to see him jumping from house to house. He realized that Sakamoto intended to get ahead of the bus and got the message. Sakamoto was startled when some children playing saw him as he jumped down in front of them. Shin suddenly entered the bus through the window, breaking it to get inside, startling everyone there. He grabbed the bus handle and attacked the criminals. He hit one in the neck and threatened to break another's arm if he didn't stop the bus. Shin looked at the driver, who asked for help, saying he couldn't remove his foot from the gas pedal because of the chains. Shin woke up the criminal to remove the chains. He then reported to Sakamoto that the bus couldn't be stopped. "No problem," answered Sakamoto, wearing a girl mask on his head. Holding a traffic sign, he declared that he would be the traffic stop. He used the traffic sign and with all his strength, stopped the moving bus. Since the driver's foot was still on the gas, the bus kept going forward. The passengers saw someone blocking the front. Finally, the bus came to a stop. Sakamoto climbed inside to find his wife. The people inside couldn't believe it and were scared of him. Meanwhile, Shin checked if the men were still alive. When asked if she was okay, Aoi said she wasn't scared because she knew he would come to the rescue. Additionally, she said she shouldn't have said those things that morning and apologized to her husband. Sakamoto just smiled and mentioned Article 12 of their family rules, treating each other to a special dinner whenever they had a fight that day. Sakamoto said he would take care of it. It was shown again that when they were younger, Sakamoto had promised to devote himself to helping others from that day on. The couple made up. Back at the Sakamoto store, while the family was eating the next day, the bus jacking incident was shown on TV. The news mentioned that the suspects were overpowered by unidentified individuals and that none of the hostages were injured. Regarding the mysterious man who stopped the bus, they said they didn't know who he was. Experts speculated that he might be a martial artist. As they watched this on TV, Sakamoto's child remarked that the masked man looked like him. Shin was surprised and wondered how they got such an angle of the footage. Fortunately, the mask made it difficult to identify him. By the way, Shin admitted that he was moved by the story of why Sakamoto stopped killing. Sakamoto wondered how he knew about it. Shin explained that it was what he was thinking while they were chasing the bus. Now that Shin was part of their household, Sakamoto said the rules applied to him as well. He handed a notebook to Shin, who happily accepted it. Sakamoto warned that if he broke the rules, he would die. Shin replied that this was against the rules. On another day, Shin was busy targeting while holding a gun. He noted that there was no obstruction and the enemy was unaware, so it was all good. They were actually at a fair. At the shooting gallery, Shin missed the target. He couldn't accept this, insisting that his aim was perfect. He inspected the rifle, saying it might be jammed and that he needed to disassemble it to check. The kids around teased him for being slow. When it was Sakamoto's turn, he won all the prizes. The attendant was furious and told him never to come back. Shin was utterly shocked by this. The new character, Officer Nakase, was introduced. She asked if the motorcycle parked there belonged to them since it was a no-parking zone. Shin replied that it was just for a few minutes as they were making a quick delivery. The policewoman noted that there were many children outside and that adults should be responsible. Shin noticed the newspaper, where the headline was about Sakamoto. The police were looking for information about the mysterious masked man. The officer mentioned that it was a hot topic in the town, a masked hero who saved people from the bus jacking incident. Both Shin and Sakamoto pretended to be clueless about it. Suddenly, her mood changed, and she said she couldn't forgive that. She questioned what kind of hero uses violence and vowed to make sure they were arrested. Sakamoto and Shin were shocked by her anger. They decided to leave, and as they walked away, Shin remarked that at least none of the passengers were injured. He then said they'll get back to making deliveries. The policewoman suddenly approached and asked how he knew that none of the passengers were hurt, as that information wasn't public knowledge. Shin said it was just a hunch. He was only hoping that everyone was okay, considering there were elderly people and others on the bus. Officer Nakase was suspicious, feeling that he seemed to know a lot. Sakamoto thought Shin should keep quiet. When the officer turned around to report the two suspicious individuals, Sakamoto and Shin suddenly ran. She thought they were shady and likely connected to the masked man, so she stretched and started chasing them. As they ran, Shin was surprised by how fast the officer was. People around were puzzled, wondering why Sakamoto was running. They thought it was unusual and that he seemed to have a lot of energy. A vendor called out to Sakamoto and asked if he wanted to try his new product. Sakamoto paused but quickly left again. Officer Nakase was confused about where the two had disappeared to. It turned out they were hiding behind facehole boards. They came out when they noticed they had lost her. While Sakamoto enjoyed eating mitarashi dango, a child noticed them and laughed, catching Nakase's attention. Shin removed his facehole board, but Sakamoto's board got stuck. Shin asked what they should do while Sakamoto was busy trying to get the board off his face. Suddenly, Sakamoto quickly avoided something and placed his dango sticks in front of it. Nakase noticed and dodged it, but she ended up stepping into wet paint. Some children approached her and asked if she was okay. Officer Nakase was furious about what happened. Shin and Sakamoto hid in a nearby shop, and as payment for hiding them, the shopkeeper said they had to buy 10 sticks of his product each. The officer was annoyed because the two managed to escape. She remarked that it was the first time anyone had gotten away from her. An elderly officer arrived and said he didn't think they were involved with the masked man. He praised Nakase for her hard work and asked if she was getting used to their job. She laughed and said it was very fulfilling. He commented that Nakase had unusual interests and mentioned that she was a top recruit, wondering why she was assigned to such a small town. She explained that she used to live there and was helped by a police officer back then. The two were listening to their conversation. Nakase said that was why she wanted to help the people there. Shin took the opportunity to run, but Sakamoto stayed. The officer left and told Nakase not to overwork herself. She agreed and greeted him back. Nakase thought about doing one more round when she heard something. A woman was struggling against some men surrounding her. Nakase approached and asked what the man was doing, telling him to stop. The man asked who she was, and she replied that she was a police officer. Just then, he accidentally dropped what appeared to be drugs, surprising Nakase. At that moment, more men arrived and asked what the commotion was. Loud noises were suddenly heard in the area, and Shin noticed this when they got home. Meanwhile, Sakamoto was happily enjoying his yakitori. The elderly officer visited them and, when asked why he was there, apologized for interrupting their meal. He explained that the new recruit, Officer Nakase, hadn't returned to their station yet. He thought she might still be chasing them and asked if they knew where she was. Both of them were clueless. Sakamoto's child mentioned that she liked the lady police officer. When asked, she replied that one time when she got lost, the officer gave her a piggyback ride home and a triple scoop ice cream. She was very kind, which worried the elderly officer a bit. Shin asked what they should do. Sakamoto replied that they should have some after-dinner exercise, and Shin agreed with the plan. In another location, Nakase was tied to a chair with frightened girls behind her. She asked if they knew how big of a problem they were facing. The leader of the Zutomo motorcycle gang, Riki Kanehira, responded that he didn't really want to do this, but since she saw the goods, he had no choice. They blindfolded Nakase and noticed she wasn't carrying a gun. She replied that even if she had one, she wouldn't point it at them. The gang members laughed and asked if she was a stupid cop for facing them unarmed. Shin climbed a post to gather information and reported to Sakamoto that he heard voices coming from an abandoned factory behind the shopping street. The girls with Nakase were crying, but she calmed them down and promised to protect them. Riki laughed and called her a weakling with crazy ideals. He questioned how she could protect anyone without using violence. Suddenly, a smoke bomb was thrown inside, surprising the gang members. Riki tried to find the culprit and saw the shadows of two figures. They struggled to see through the smoke while Shin informed Sakamoto about their targets' locations. Despite the smoke, Sakamoto managed to kick one of the gang members. Although they couldn't see their enemies, Shin guided Sakamoto using his ability. The gang members grew nervous because they couldn't pinpoint where the attackers were. Suddenly, they emerged from the smoke, directly attacking and hitting the gang members with blows, punches, and kicks. Even though the gang members were numerous, they were no match for Sakamoto and Shin. They took down each one, and eventually, they had defeated them all. Nakase was surprised by the sudden silence and wondered what was happening. Riki, frustrated, blamed the police officer for everything. Just then, Sakamoto arrived and punched him. When Nakase fell from the chair, her blindfold came off. Shin panicked because Sakamoto wasn't wearing a mask. Nakase saw him as a strong man and asked who he was. Shin shouted in surprise because Sakamoto had slimmed down. The two of them then ran away to escape. Nakase stopped them, surprised because she found his face familiar. The next day, at the Sakamoto store, Shin was astonished to see that Sakamoto was back to his chubby self while busily eating a sandwich. Shin wondered if Sakamoto had really burned that many calories yesterday. At the police station, the elderly officer was surprised to see Nakase suddenly doing weight training. She explained that she was angry because she felt helpless the previous day. She tried to recall who the man with glasses was, feeling like she knew him. Meanwhile, Aoi was furious with her husband, who apologized to her. Shin thought that Sakamoto looked better when he wasn't so big. The two were seen in Nikita Chinatown. Shin was excited because the place was so large. Sakamoto remembered his wife's instructions not to forget what she had asked him to buy if they passed through there, including something for their daughter, Hannah. Shin wondered why they had to go there just to buy stock for the store. Sakamoto thought to himself that there was a limit of 50 divine pork buns per customer. Shin was surprised to learn that this was their goal. Sakamoto was happy because, finally, he got something for his wife and daughter. Suddenly, someone jumped in front of them, startling Shin. Sakamoto caught the woman, but the carefully guarded gift he was carrying was damaged. They were concerned about what to do about the requested divine pork buns. Chasing the woman who had jumped were several men. They called her a stray cat, running around everywhere. One of them threatened to hurt her so she wouldn't be able to run again. This mysterious woman was Lu Xiaodong. She called them slugs and said they would never catch her. Someone suddenly grabbed her from behind, preventing her from escaping. While the man held her, he said it was time to cut her Achilles tendon. Just then, Sakamoto approached and used tongs to cut the man's knife. Shin suddenly jumped and hit the man with his bag. The men wondered who these people were. After Lu broke free, she prepared to attack the man with a gun. Her punch was incredibly powerful, impressing Shin with her skill in Tai Chi now that the men were down. Shin was curious about who the woman was, while Sakamoto was only concerned about his pork buns. More men arrived and identified Lu, saying that her gang was with her. Sakamoto and Shin were surprised, as they were mistaken for Lu's gang members. They quickly ran away, with Sakamoto carrying Lu. The men chased them and even fired shots. Shin remarked that such incidents had been happening more frequently lately. Meanwhile, Lu asked who they were. When someone searched for the woman, he was told that she had escaped. She ran away with some men. They were trying to figure out who her companions were. They mentioned that they had already captured her family, but the man said what's the point if she had escaped now? Their boss, Wang, the chairman of Danshokai, couldn't believe they had let Lu escape again. The man apologized, but Wang dismissed him and told him to call the person they knew. Suddenly, the man was beheaded by a bald man. The beheader told Sun He that the head was still trying to breathe, seemingly unaware that he was already dead. He then laughed. Another man with long hair was shown, who appears to be his older brother, who called Bacho stupid and told him not to play with corpses, saying it wasn't classy. Wang asked why he killed the man, remarking that the brothers were really crazy. Wang said he needed the key that Lu had. If he could get it, he would rule the Chinese black market. The brothers' job was to find it. Bacho asked if they could kill anyone who got in their way, and Wang replied, "As you please." Back with Shin, he was shocked to learn that Lu was the daughter of the famous triad family, the Lu family. She told him to lower his voice. Shin asked why she was being chased, and she replied that it was because of a key she possessed. Meanwhile, Sakamoto was still thinking about the pork buns. Lu explained that the key was for the family's hidden safe and that her parents had entrusted it to her. Shin suggested she throw it away, saying it wasn't worth dying for. But Lu responded, "Never." Lu said that her parents had protected that key. If she couldn't take care of it, she wouldn't be able to face them in the afterlife. When Shin asked if her parents had been killed, she replied that it was none of their business. She apologized for causing them trouble. Suddenly, Sakamoto pulled Shin aside and asked if Lu knew how to make pork buns. She said yes because her father had taught her. Shin was shocked by Sakamoto's dedication to pork buns, but he mentioned that the men involved were a big problem. He replied that restocking would be postponed. First they will help Lu, but once it was over, she would have to make them pork buns. That was the deal. Lu was surprised and asked who they were. Just then, Shin noticed someone approaching. It was Bacho, who suddenly kicked Sakamoto in the face. Shin was shocked by the force of the impact, which sent Sakamoto flying into a nearby building. Lu was annoyed, realizing that they had been caught up with. She said this was bad news. Sun He criticized his brother for having no style, but his brother silenced him, saying that style didn't matter for an assassin. The important thing was to find the target and kill them. The body could be arranged nicely afterward. Sun Hee replied that the problem was with his brother's method of killing. Shin asked who they were, and Lu replied that they were the twin assassins, Sun Hee and Bacho. They were paid to kill any target, and were both serial killers who enjoyed killing. She said they were disgusting because they took the heads of their victims home to sketch them. Bacho remarked that they were famous, and he liked it. His twin, however, said they were supposed to be anonymous. Suddenly, Shin attacked Sun Hee, but Sun Hee blocked him. He asked if Shin was angry because they had killed his companion, calling him overly sensitive. Shin asked what he meant. He implied that if they didn't know who Sakamoto was, they were amateurs. Meanwhile, Bacho was about to behead Lu from behind, but Sakamoto suddenly returned and knocked him down. His twin was shocked. They couldn't believe the immense strength he had displayed. The impact even cracked the floor, causing it to collapse into the dining area below. They continued their confrontation there. Sun Hee was impressed, acknowledging that Sakamoto was indeed strong. When he asked his brother's opinion, Bacho replied that the floor collapsing wasn't a big deal and that it was time to kill this joker. Meanwhile, they looked for Lu and told her to hand over the key like a good girl so they could give her a beautiful death. She responded that the key was to her parents' treasure and she'd rather die than give it to them. "Okay," he replied. "That's the same thing your parents said before they died. They valued that thing more than their lives. People like you have no class." Lu, irritated, told him to shut up. She was about to attack, but Sakamoto stopped her. She asked what he was doing. Shin advised her not to take the bait like that. Lu explained that the safe contained their family treasure. Her father had died at the hands of those twins just to protect it. "Is that right?" Sun Hee asked, suddenly throwing a small knife aimed at Lu. However, Sakamoto caught it. Sun Hee, irritated, told him not to interfere and said he was going to let Lu join her parents. Sakamoto replied that it wasn't up to him to decide what was more important to her. Bacho silenced him and prepared their Mabobru special technique. This technique involved rapidly and repeatedly slashing their swords at the enemy to shred them like tofu. However, Bacho was shocked to see that it had no effect on Sakamoto. Shin asked if Sakamoto was okay, and he replied that he just had a bit of a neck cramp. Sun Hee couldn't believe that Sakamoto had avoided their attack. No one had ever dodged their tofu scramble attack before. Moreover, he wondered how Sakamoto had no injuries despite his size. They prepared for their next attack, saying he was only the third person to witness it. Suddenly, Sakamoto grabbed a cooking pot and pan and used them as weapons. He struck Bacho with the pot and, when Sun Hee attacked, Sakamoto used the pan to break his weapon. Sun Hee was in disbelief, as his chakram was supposed to be ultra-hard. He wondered how that was possible. Shin noticed something strange about Sakamoto's hand, and Sakamoto replied that it had been a long time since he wielded something so heavy. Sun Hee, now irritated with the two of them, headed straight for Lu to kill her. However, Shin, knowing his plan from reading his thoughts, used a rope to stop him and slammed him to the ground. Sun Hee was shocked when Sakamoto suddenly hit him with a refrigerator or cabinet. Finally, they defeated the twin assassins, much to Lu's amazement. When she asked who they were, Sakamoto replied that they were just shopkeepers. Lu laughed and said they were really weird. Back with Wong, he wondered what the twins were up to. The safe they had found long ago was there, and he just needed the key to open it. Suddenly, Shin and Sakamoto arrived, announcing they had a special delivery. They were carrying the bodies of the twins, Bacho and Sun Hee. Wong asked how they had gotten in and what had happened to his guards. Lu suddenly appeared behind him, telling him to be quiet and not to speak. Wong, nervous, apologized and pleaded with Lu, saying he would do whatever she wanted if she spared his life. Lu responded that his apology couldn't bring her parents back and that he should pay for his actions in hell. Lu then knocked Wong down. Shin asked if that was enough and prepared to attack further, but he was startled when he sensed Sakamoto's intention to kill him. Lu replied that it was enough. Lu said that if she killed everyone who wronged her, it would never end. Her father taught her that the best revenge is to live happily. The two stood by while Lu struggled to open the safe. Shin, who called her China, asked why it was taking so long. She replied that her name was Lu Xiaotan and explained that the safe was old and hard to open. When it finally opened, Shin and Sakamoto entered before Lu. They were astonished to find it filled with gold, silver, treasures, and jewelry. There were also books, CDs, and toys. Everything seemed to be there. Shin noticed a notebook containing an inventory of the contents. He remarked that it was the #1 treasure of the head of the Lu family for a long time. In other words, different generations treasured different things. It seemed the second family head loved manga. Lu wondered what her father's treasure might be. When they looked, they found a bottle of sake. The note said he would drink that sake when his child grew up. Lu teared up upon reading this, while Shin was curious. Lu said that it was the most delicious sake in the world. As a token of gratitude, she'll treat them a glass. Shin was excited and hoped it would taste great. Meanwhile, Sakamoto was still carrying the pork buns. Shin wondered why he still had them and blamed Lu for them being crushed. However, when he tasted them, he said they were still delicious despite being smashed. After that, Lu started working at Sakamoto's store. Shin was surprised and asked Lu what she was doing. She replied that she had no other place to work. Shin pointed out that she had plenty of wealth. Lu said she couldn't just sell their family treasure and called him a moron. Annoyed, Shin complained about the disorganized products on the shelves. Lu retorted that he shouldn't be so strict, saying people would still buy them. Shin argued that she should not put detergent in the refrigerator. Meanwhile, Sakamoto silenced them, saying he had a headache from his hangover. The next day, Shin was furious because Lu was late. She retorted that he was too uptight and that she was only a little late. But he argued that it wasn't just a little. She was 2 hours late. Moreover, she showed up to work in pajamas and a jacket. She explained that putting together her look for the day took a lot of time. Shin guessed that Lu had probably never worked a day in her life. However, she corrected him, saying she had worked before. When asked what she did, she replied that she helped her father by digging and burying mysterious sacks. Shin urged Sakamoto to fire Lu, saying she didn't fit the peaceful vibe of the store. Lu asked what peaceful vibe Shin was talking about. Shin shushed her, saying they were working on it. Sakamoto told Shin that wasn't nice and told Lu she should apologize when she's late. Shin was shocked that Sakamoto spoke up. Sakamoto asked why they were staring at him, saying they looked like pigeons hit by .22 long-range bullets. He sent them back to work, assigning Shin to outdoor cleanup while Lu was to finish stocking the pork buns. Lu commented that it wasn't normal for Sakamoto to be so talkative today. Shin was sweating because, in all the years he'd known Sakamoto, he'd never heard him talk that much. Normally, even his thoughts were barely expressed. Sakamoto wondered what they thought of him, saying that he was human too. Suddenly, he thanked them for everything. Not only had his speech changed, but his entire personality seemed different. Just then, another Sakamoto arrived. The two were utterly confused, seeing two Sakamotos in front of them. The new arrival walked past the other Sakamoto and sat down in his usual spot. The first one commented that it was surprising. "Are they doppelgangers?" he asked. Suddenly, he attacked Sakamoto while he was reading the newspaper. Unlike Shin, who was visibly nervous, Sakamoto didn't seem surprised. Sakamoto dodged and grabbed a cutter, while the other one pulled out a gun. Sakamoto got the doppelganger cornered with the cutter, and he remarked that it had been a long time since they last saw each other. It was revealed that his attacker's name is Nagumo. Nagumo reverted to his original appearance and replied that he was happy Sakamoto's moves were still sharp. Shin was taken aback not only by the sudden change in Nagumo's appearance, but also because he had been fooled, unable to read Nagumo's thoughts. When Nagumo looked behind him, he burst out laughing at the clueless expressions of the two. He apologized, saying he didn't expect to fool them so easily. Shin grabbed him and asked Sakamoto who he was. Lu, annoyed, suggested they put him in a bag. Nagumo introduced himself, saying he worked at the supermarket across the street and that he was friends with Sakamoto. He claimed to be 18 years old. Shin was shocked that they were friends and that he was so young. Lu pointed out that there's no supermarket across the street. Sakamoto thought to himself that Nagumo used to be his colleague when he was a hitman and that his real age was 27. Furious, Shin and Lu started kicking Nagumo for lying. They tied Nagumo to a chair, and he revealed that there was now a bounty on Sakamoto's head worth 1 billion yen. Lu didn't believe it, and Shin agreed, pointing a gun at Nagumo. Shin said it was impossible. Even a grade school kid wouldn't tell such a lie. But Nagumo insisted it was true. It was officially decided at the Assassins' Conference yesterday, and it would be listed tomorrow. However, the rumor was already spreading among hitmen that the legendary assassin was back in business. Just then, a delivery man arrived to deliver pizza. Shin read his thoughts, and suddenly, the delivery man pulled out a pizza cutter. He was actually an assassin known as Pizza Nakajima. He boasted about how easily he had gotten inside and said they would now become pepperoni on the chopping block. He warned them not to move, or he would ruin Nagumo's face. Shin and Lu were shocked, while Sakamoto remained unbothered, calmly eating the pizza. The assassin grew annoyed because Sakamoto didn't seem to care, even though he was about to kill his friend. Sakamoto sighed while enjoying the cheese pull on his pizza. Suddenly, the pizza assassin was shocked as someone choked him from behind. It was Nagumo, who reiterated that he was telling the truth and that he despised deceit. Shin was surprised how Nagumo escaped. Sakamoto told Nagumo not to kill the assassin, so he released him. He couldn't believe that Sakamoto still had a no-kill policy. He questioned if Sakamoto thought he could defeat him and the other assassins like that. Though they were now on guard, Nagumo said he was just joking and wouldn't get involved. He explained that their specialization was avoiding assassination, and Sakamoto knew that. As he left, Nagumo mentioned that he missed the days when they used to work together. Sakamoto called out to Nagumo and asked how his death would be of benefit. Nagumo replied that it was a good question. Their job was just to follow orders, not to question them. However, he noted that Sakamoto wasn't being discreet for a retired guy, calling him stupid for wiping out the Danshokai triad. Lu then asked if there were more guys like the pizza assassin. Scratching his head, Nagumo said they wouldn't see any more small-timers like him. That guy was a total amateur. He left, carrying the body of the pizza assassin, and said, "Nice seeing you again, Sakamoto." He wanted to say goodbye to him before he gets wiped. Shin chased after Nagumo but was shocked when he suddenly disappeared. He wondered if Nagumo was an ally or not. Lu, on the other hand, thought it might be better to return to her own country, but she wasn't sure which place was safer. Sakamoto noticed something in the pizza box. There was a camera inside. The people watching commented that they should find a new gopher or errand boy since there was an issue with the pizza boy. Some couldn't believe that there was a 1 billion yen bounty on Sakamoto, whom they referred to as Tubby. They remarked that the black-haired man seemed even more dangerous. One of them said to ignore that for now, as they were craving pizza. They underestimated Sakamoto, thinking they just needed to figure out the time and place where he would be vulnerable. They believed they could outwit him because that was how the Dondakai operated. Another person mentioned that Sakamoto was a former member of the Order, warning that if they made any mistakes, they would all be wiped out. Someone else questioned whether the Order was just an urban legend. They pointed out that Sakamoto retired 5 years ago, so that shouldn't be a problem. Suddenly, they heard someone speak and issue a threat, startling them. It was Sakamoto, who was pointing a gun at the camera they had planted in the pizza box. He warned that if they continued to pursue him, they should be prepared to see hell. They were shocked that he noticed their camera so quickly. One man, however, got excited at the mention of hell, saying he was looking forward to it. Sakamoto then shot the camera, cutting off its signal. Outside the store, Shin was worried. He said that if what Nagumo said was true, more assassins like the pizza assassin would come. He asked what they should do. Sakamoto replied that there was no point in worrying. Since they didn't know who the enemy was, it was better to stay home and lie low. Sakamoto's wife arrived and asked him if he was ready for tomorrow. Sakamoto wondered what was happening tomorrow, and Shin asked Hana why she's wearing an ear headband. Hana approached excitedly and said that they would meet Sugar tomorrow. Aoi mentioned that they had promised Hana they would go to the amusement park the next day, and she was very excited about it. Shin was shocked and wondered what they should do. Sakamoto replied that they would go. They had to. Hana and Aoi were excited as they planned the food they would bring.